Hello, my name is Jorb. I love gear, and I'm very excited to introduce to you the Pittsburgh Modular Taiga. Taiga, or the Taiga, is a semi-modular Eurorack compatible synthesizer that combines elements of both East and West Coast synthesis. And I could stop there, and I would think it would be pretty compelling. But if you dig even a little deeper, boy is it a lot more than that. What I see is a very thoughtfully packaged collection of Pittsburgh Modular's 10+ year history of innovative circuit design. And to see that in a market that is flooded with clones and reissues, to see something with so much of its own identity is so exciting. From the oscillators to the wavefolders to the filter, none of these sound-generating modules are boring, or even really traditional, and that's all paired with utilities that I see as flexible and deeply clever. But most importantly, all these things together, they sound fucking good. And I'm thrilled it exists, I'm thrilled to have one, and I'm thrilled to show it to you guys today. Pittsburgh Modular sent this over for me to take a look at, and I do get to keep it, but my opinions are always my own, you guys know that. If you're a subscriber or a patron, I appreciate you, thanks for coming back. If you aren't either and you like what you see, I encourage you to support me in whatever way feels best for you. I'm getting annoyed with my own pitch at this point. That could be like a comment, a subscription, the Patreon, the merch. Use my affiliate links if you're going to buy anything, especially because I think a lot of people are going to buy this. Please use my affiliate link. There you go. There's a lot to talk about with Taiga, so let's start talking. Here we are with the Taiga. First thing you'll notice, what fun, colorful knobs. Well, they're just like the knobs on the Create Audio East Beast and the West Best, further indicating that yes, this is indeed another collaboration between Pittsburgh and Create, but really the comparison or the resemblance does go a bit deeper. There's some shared design features with both the East Beast and the West Best, but the Taiga really is a lot more than the two Create boxes sort of Voltron together. Anyway. So all I have plugged in right now is MIDI in from the key step to this TRS to MIDI adapter. This, I'm using the sine wave out of Oscillator 1 to sync my oscilloscope. Just so things stay nice and tidy as I go through some more outlandish waves in a second here. And then the mono out, the single mono out. Okay, so from left to right, we have a bunch of like clearly defined sections, and all of their patch points are below. And very generally for all the buttons, the white function or the white label. So it's going to happen just when you touch it. And there's a yellow function. You need to hold edit to get to those. But that's about it. You'll see white is an output, green is an input, and that continues on to describing the normal connections. So for the mixer, we can see, gosh, I really hope that comes up on camera. If it doesn't, I'll get close up for you. But oscillator 1, 2, and 3, and then noise are green text underneath each of these 4 channels of the mixer. Great, I think that's everything you need to know as far as what you're looking at on the panel. Let's start with the oscillators. So, already, these are very non-standard. So we have a bunch of different wave shapes. And the button here says seed, and the manual describes it sort of, I'm paraphrasing here, but it says think of these labels, think of these as guides to the harmonic content you can expect. Because the waves aren't exactly a sine wave. Or a triangle, or a sawtooth, or a pulse. That's just the closest idea harmonically. And they call them seed waves because that's where you start. And once you start wave shaping them, because all 3 of these oscillators have a wave folder, they really turn into something very different. And so let's just go through all of them. This is our sine wave, so described. And even like already, if you're just like, oh, it's a subtractive synth that has a wave folder on all 3 oscillators, that's sick. That's a really compelling argument for a new product. Anyway, I've clicked onto the next one, the warped sine wave. Doesn't sound that different when we start with just the waves. And actually, I'm going to show you another trick here. If I hold down the seed button for one oscillator and press the seed button of another, it'll jump me back to that you know, you can like copy the waveform, so to speak. But here's the sine wave. I'm going to turn up the wavefolding a little bit and then jump to the warped sine. Sound really, really different, even though when we just start, they're not hardly any different. So that warp circuit is something Pittsburgh developed. I can't remember if that was for the Voltage Research Lab or the Microvolt, but it's something they came up with, and I still remember the marketing line to fold waves that were previously unfoldable. And it sounds kind of silly, but that's kind of the idea behind this, and sort of explains that idea of, hey, think of these as harmonic guidelines. So even we get to what is the triangle wave. Doesn't really look like a triangle wave on the scope, but harmonically it's kind of close to what we're hearing. And it's very, very good for folding. So all of the waves in here are specifically set up to sound good with the wavefolder. And this is our warped triangle. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. The sawtooth. A warped sawtooth, which might be my favorite. Sounds enormous, sounds very West Coast. Pulse wave, which I wish had a little more value here on the shape, because I'll actually show you. So we have this attenuated input for the shape CV. By default, it's headed to the triangle of the LFO, which you can see me change the rate of here. But if I turn that up, you can hear that the shape definitely goes a little bit further. So I wish we had the full range on the knob here. For the other waves, it doesn't seem to bottom out at a point. For the pulse wave, I'd love a little bit more. But there's no warped pulse. You have a combination sine and pulse, though. Which is something I really liked on the East Beast. And then you have this random per key press, which is another thing that I really liked about the East Beast and the West Beast. And I'm actually going to turn on the internal arpeggiator here. And every time it hits a key, we get a random wave shape. And already, this is like a super, this could be really complicated to patch up in any other system. And here on the Taiga, it's, you know, you could get there in seconds. I just love it. I'm going to be gushing about this the whole time. But there you go. There are 3 oscillators that are the same in every way except for the range they have on their pitch control. So I've turned up the second channel of our mixer here, which is defaulted to oscillator 2. And I'll put these both on, let's say, sawtooth. Okay, so when you're at noon, they're all at the same pitch. And we can now see the range of pitch on oscillator 1 isn't very far. You can think of it like a fine tune. Oscillator 2 goes an octave up and an octave down. Awesome. And oscillator 3, I'm actually going to turn down to, just so it's easier for us to listen. Oscillator 3 has about 2 octaves up and 2 octaves down. How about all 3? Move everything down an octave. And that whole time, I hadn't moved our filter at all. Man, just so many, even thinking, I'm going to gush about this the whole time. Take any individual section of the synthesizer, and that could be the coolest part of any other semi-modular synth. Okay, I'm getting too excited. Let's talk about the filter. The filter is the Pittsburgh filter, and it is a 12 dB per octave multimode filter. It has low pass, band pass, high pass, combinations of each, and notch. There's a lot to filter through. I need to lean forward to see all my lights. But just its normal sweep. Let's give it a pair of sawtooths to listen to. The Pittsburgh filter does a few things that other filters don't. One, resonance does not cut bass at all. So good. And resonance is not ever self-oscillating. It's really, really high. You can certainly hear it, but if I turn down these oscillators, it's filtering what little bit of bleed we have. It's not generating its own tone. And I think that's an idea, I'm not totally sure, but at least, you know, there's some commonality with Pittsburgh filters had a switch for stability in some of the earlier modules, and I believe we're seeing a manifestation of that same idea of stability, which was the mode where it would never self-oscillate. And I think those are the two things that define it. And I talked to Richard Nickel briefly at Super Booth. I don't know if he'll even remember this, but we were talking about the East Beast. One of the things he said about the filter, after I complimented the sound, was it has no dead spots. That was one of the goals. And I realized that's the combination of those two ideas of you can add as much resonance as you want and it'll never become self-oscillating and you don't lose any bass while you do it. This is, of course, by default modulated by ADSR 1. Sounds so good. These are super simple. I'm not going to talk that much about them. I will say this is my first complaint about really anything on the synthesizer, and this is something that is present in a few places. I really wish I had a finer control of this first portion of attack, because even if I'm about, what's that, 30% of the way up? Really, really slow attack. Right? That's maybe 2 millimeters, you know what I mean? I think also the release as well for both of these. I would love a bit more generous range for the earlier portions of these knobs. I think that's also true for some of the modulation parameters. I don't know if that's just the sort of sounds I'm hoping to get out of it versus what's there, or if it's a taper I'm not comfortable with or what. But that's my one complaint. And I think I said something similar when I was demoing the East Beast. I would have loved a little finer control in the early portions of the envelope. But these knobs are easy to get to, smooth turning, so I don't have much of a problem with it. Anyway, that was the filter. On to the dynamics controller. And this is something else that's very, very unique. This has been present in, I think there's 2 of them in the Voltage Research Lab. But think of the dynamics controller like a low-pass gate. It's a VCA and a VCF, and it goes back to Buchla designs, Buchla ideas. And as far as a low-pass gate in the Buchla sense, the idea is when we hear sounds, the sort of psychoacoustic reality of sounds is something that's louder will also be brighter. And so this is a VCA and a VCF together, if you want to think of it in subtractive synthesis terms. So there's a few ways we can control it. One, this dynamics knob is like a pass-through. Right, you're just turning up VCA pass-through. Actually, I'm going to open the filter all the way up. And so this first mode is just a VCA. So right now, this dynamic CV is going to the second ADSR. And things I set up on the second ADSR. control the contour of our VCA, but this response changes the way CV affects this. If I change to the second mode here, this is a low pass gate. So now remember, our filter's all the way open, and it's not, shouldn't be moving at all. If it is, it's going to be opening it up even more, which you can't. Can you hear that? If I turn up our resonance here. And that's not our filter moving at all. That's just our dynamics controller. So I turn down the resonance. Go up an octave. You hear that we're getting quieter and darker as it moves. And now, this dynamics knob is a VCA pass-through and a filter cutoff, effectively. Great. There is a third mode here, but as far as I understand, in an early implementation of the low-pass gate, it's something you pluck and you don't necessarily modulate with a function generator. And so we can hear just the plucked response of this dynamics controller. If I turn down the CV and I hit edit and add like the MIDI trigger to this dynamics controller. And then this response matters a lot as to what we're hearing. And I'm actually going to turn on our ARP. Not our filter, remember? That's all that's happening here. And then if you're running a sequence like this, move your dynamics controller. And think about... Love that. And think about what that was. That was just two oscillators in the dynamics controller. I could use the filter for something else. Or I could use the filter with the third oscillator as a separate voice. I wasn't using either ADSR. I could have another VCA if this was an Eurorack, blah, blah, blah. Again, I'm getting ahead of myself. But the flexibility of every section of this makes it really, really inviting to try and patch them out and try and come up with, like, clever routings. Anyway, the dynamics controller is awesome. I'm going to leave it actually in the low-pass gate mode, just a little bit of resonance, because I think that's a unique enough character. Great, great, great. Our last section here, and sort of the only one I don't totally love, is the delay. And I am totally a sucker for analog delay, and I'm totally a sucker for delay built into synthesizers. So this is our max delay time, and let me actually just make something way more abrupt. Make something way, way abrupt. Our maximum delay time is not that long. Okay? And there's even some high clock bleed already. If I bring it a little shorter, that's already like about as tight as a slapback as I'll even be comfortable with. And if I try and like stretch everything out, this is about the combination settings I like best. Very nearly the highest time. That's a pretty generous amount of feedback. I'm going to add our first patch cable here, and I'm going to modulate our time a little bit. This is the first thing that actually I wanted to show you that isn't a normal connection. But this is the full range of the time CV just because it's already going. But I want it to be really subtle. If I bring our time really tight, And again, I wish I had some finer control of the knob here. You can sort of get chorus and flanger sounds. You actually go full wet. Remember what it sounds like without it. This is just our dry. Then I blend over to both. So I like it for adding these sort of general modulations. Man, it sounds good with all that feedback. I like it for adding these sort of general modulations. I don't think there's quite enough delay time to be the ambient delay I would like it to be. I would even say twice as many Bucket Brigade stages would be really, really welcome. I don't know if that's something that was affected by the chip shortage or the intention is really for modulation. Actually, this is a good chance to say this. I'm super happy to have this before other people have done their videos, before a lot of the marketing material is out, because I just get to experience it like totally fresh. And I've never really been able to do that, especially with something like this that is so flexible and can have so many possible interpretations. So I'm really, really grateful to be able to do that. But I also don't know if it means other people have figured out a way to utilize the delay, you know what I mean, that really works for them. But for me, I like it for doing these sort of ambitious chorus flanger things. Or for modulating it in a way that's completely bonkers. So this is just this square wave. And I might even take that out of the sample and hold, which I didn't show you, I kind of skipped over. Anyway, yeah, there's that take. I like the delay at its max time setting for a little bit of ambiance. Really wish it had twice as much time, or even more. But for doing sort of experimental chorus and flanger things, I think it's really, really fun. But I really, really wish I had finer control of the time CV. I would even say that it wasn't bipolar would be nice, but I think it really has. I think it really needs to be. This is a control I'd like to bring down as well. Anyway, everything past this gets a little heady and a little advanced, and I want to talk about, I know in some of my drafts in my intro, I say that all the utilities are very, very clever, and I mean that, and I'll talk about the mixer as a good prime example of that. But first, like, sound generation, this is dope. The filter's really cool. The oscillators are super, super flexible, and wavefolders that sound good and really can push them into new territories. And you get this combination of east and west, which is something that I think is, you know, gets thrown around a lot. But this really is it. Here's a bunch of ideas from a bunch of different places. Also through the Pittsburgh lens, like everything has been developed by them in their way, and so it feels very, very cohesive. But if you think about anything specifically, there's a lot of provenance, there's a lot of design, there's a lot of history behind every part of this. I really, really am a fan. And in some ways, this is sort of the promise of Eurorack delivered all in one module. You have all these modules that are different from different places, from different designs, that are born from different ideologies, almost, if you want to think of it like that. And they all get to come together to make one unique, exciting thing that's worth exploring and trying strange things with. And I'm very, very into that. Okay, I'm getting a little heady. I have a bunch of patch cables in my hand. Let's look down here at the mixer. And I'm shooting in 4K, so I'm going to blow this up as much as I can. Hope it's all visible. You see we have our 4 inputs, which are for these 4 knobs. There's actually a 5th input through the preamp, which also I haven't showed you. Good God, there's so many things. But we have 2 outputs, 1 and 2, and then a mix of all of them. Or if you plug something into 1 and 2, that connection is broken, that normal connection is broken, and then the mix is just 3, 4, and the preamp. So for example, I could take the out of oscillator 1, put it into mixer's channel 3, and the out of oscillator 2 into mixer's channel 4, and the out of oscillator 3, and run it right into the input of the preamp. And so now, if I turn these down, and I turn up 3, I turn up 3, that's oscillator 1, 4 is oscillator 2, and this level for the preamp is oscillator 3. And we can drive it now. And now I have 1 and 2 of the mixer opened up to do whatever else I want. So what if I take the sine wave from oscillator 2, just the sine wave, and I pull that into channel 1 of the mixer. I turn everything else down. There's just the sine wave. Okay, now what if I bring in the sample and hold, which is triggered from the noise, and do channel 2, and then I use the combination of 1 and 2 to modulate the filter. Now that I've plugged in here, now that I've plugged into it, it won't be part of the audio path we hear. But now I'm modulating the filter. But now I'm modulating the filter with oscillator 2 and sample and hold, and that's broken out of the mixer. We have a separate 2-channel and 3-channel mixer. And right now, one's doing CV and one's doing audio. And what if I take oscillator 2 out, and something actually I didn't show you, you can decouple all of these from MIDI, so that's edit and then the seed button. And then I'll turn it way down. You can use it as an LFO. I know that was kind of a lot, but that was just to show you the mixer can be a 2-channel and a 3-channel mixer, and you can use one for audio and one for CV, no problem. That's very, very clever. That's very, very flexible. There is, I'm going to take out all of my patch cables here. There is another module I didn't mention. Over here, we have a mixer and a splitter, and there's 2 ins and 2 outs. So if I plug just one thing in, I talked about our sample and hold. So if I plug our sample and hold into the input, now we have unity gain mixer if I plug something else in the input, or a 1 to 2 splitter. And so I can now modulate 2 things with our sample and hold. Let's send that to oscillator 2 pitch, actually oscillator 2 FM, and I'm going to bring that back into MIDI control. And also, I'll use another blue one, and also the filter cutoff. So these things are going to change together. Let's do frequency 1. Awesome. That, as far as like, oh, this is a Eurorack compatible thing that can grow, having utilities like that matters a whole lot. Anyway, another thing we can do with this mixer and splitter, and this is just an idea I'm having right now, let's use it as a mixer. And so we're going to have one of the inputs going to, let's do the sine wave out of oscillator 2, and then the other input, let's do to the output of the filter. Okay, and then the output of our mixer, our splitter, in this case a mixer, to the input of the dynamics. So I've just sent the sine wave from oscillator 2, bypassing everything, the mixer and the filter, to get to the dynamics controller. Even if I turn everything down in the mixer, I've got this low end. That'll persist. Not like a sub-oscillator, but adding low end, you know, in addition. Bypassing our filter. There are so many ways to use that mixer or splitter. I love that. And, you know, I think instead of just going through other little examples, I'm going to set up a really, really complicated patch, and then I'll show you some sound examples and talk about how I got there. Gosh, and I feel like I missed things, but I think I'm happy with what I did show you. I showed you the things that feel the most important to me. Okay, I'm going to set up something wacky. Okay, here we are. I got something kind of wacky set up. I'm going to introduce Oscillator 2. So Oscillator 2 is being driven by the built-in arpeggiator. Oscillator 3 is synced to Oscillator 2, but isn't getting MIDI pitch. It is being modulated. It's FM with the LFO. That's one set of voices. I'm also sending Oscillator 1 pitch from my key step. Notice I don't have MIDI plugged in anymore. It's getting pitch from my key step, and I'm triggering envelope 2. And so we have two separate voices. We have oscillators 2 and 3 going through the filter, and then into the mixer / splitter, and then that's going into the input of the echoes. And then the other half of the mixer and the splitter is oscillator 1 through the dynamics controller. I also have, just for a little bit of shenanigans, the gate out of the arpeggiator is triggering the time CV of the delay here. Let me bring those back in. Jorb, you're in stereo now, don't forget. Okay, this is something I had the idea for, and I was like, yeah, that'll be too much work, and then I couldn't help myself. This is a 3-voice paraphonic setup using the Create Audio Nifty keys. And I'm really, really enjoying it. So everything you're hearing There's a 3-voice Paraphonic, up to 4-voice Paraphonic mode on the nifty keys. And I have the CV for 1, 2, and 3. You guessed it, going to oscillators 1, 2, and 3. They're all in the same wave shape currently. And I have all 3 of the gates going to ADSR1, ADSR2, and then the ADSR from the Create Audio function junction. And each of those is controlling one channel of this quad VCA. And all 3 of the outputs are going to channels 1, 2, and 3. A mix of all 3 of those is coming back into the filter, and we're going out of the filter right into my Bizarre Jezebel Athra, which is a stereo delay that does some fluttering. And lo-fi thing. I also, the way the triggering works on this, it's not round robin, so the first note will always be 1, and so I'm still using ADSR1 to control the filter. Even though they all have their own amp envelopes, that's getting mixed and running through the filter, which is opening with the first voice you hit. And then all 3 of them are having their shape modulated by a different LFO. One is getting the LFO that's built into the Taiga. The LFO of the function junction is 2, and the looping function generator is for the 3rd one. Three voices is not a lot, but as a sort of proof of concept. What fun. Okay, I'm back. There were a few things I cut out in my first pass of this edit, mostly a really long segment where I talked about the control module, the control section, and like the digital multi-mod. It's really similar to what's on the East Beast and the West Pest. It can be a digital function generator, like a clock synced LFO, just a decay envelope. You can set up mini CCs, all sorts of stuff. And it is still super cool, but unlike the Create boxes, the labels aren't on the front panel. And that seems like a small thing, but it makes it way more annoying to use. You have to remember which light represents which one, instead of having visual feedback and a panel label that'll tell you that. But I think the Taiga stands on its own without that, without those very clever and very useful additions, much better than the East Beast and the West Pest do. I think it's an important part of making those feel complete. At least certainly the West Pest for me. So I didn't bring it up because I really think it's a wash. It's harder to get to the digital LFO, but you need it less. And it's harder to get to the additional decay envelope, but you need it less. Do you hear what I'm saying? So it's been upgraded to a nice to have, and is something that I don't feel like I have to mention. And I cut a bunch of patch examples when I was talking about utilities because they were boring and I wasn't saying anything new. And if you're going to get to that level, you're going to read the manual or you're going to understand what I'm showing you anyway. So, my conclusions. Overall, here on the Taiga, my only complaints are very, very minor. I wanted finer control of some of the modulation parameters and in the early range of some of the envelope stages. I would maybe like octave switching on the oscillators, even though the solution I think is still pretty elegant. I want more time available on the delay, but that's it. Everything else, and there is a lot more, is a total success. And when I sit and think about what I want your rack to be, not even just saying what I want a self-contained synthesizer semi-modular guy, when I think about what I want your rack to be, it's pretty nearly captured just here in the Taiga. And you can hear me talk about it a lot in other videos, and I mentioned it specifically in Building a Better Mono. But when I think about your rack, I'm excited by the patching, I'm excited by the interaction of it. And I want modules that are characterful on their own, things that are unique, and especially things that might not normally be found in the same piece of hardware. Your rack gives you the chance to bring those things together, making a unique synth voice, along with, of course, the flexibility to implement some non-traditional routings or just experiment. Just plug a patch cable into one end and then stop and look and see what you can plug it into. I love that about your rack. And And by my measure, more than any of these Eurorack-compatible semi-modular synths, certainly all the ones I can think of, Pittsburgh Modular has captured that spirit, that magic of Eurorack. And I don't know whether they were set out to do that or not, but they really have achieved it. And I think it gives all of us a chance to stop and think about how much cool stuff Pittsburgh has done. I have a few random utilities from their earlier ranges. I have a Lifeforms ADSR. I have one of the like brushed aluminum panel with the Moog knob, a toolbox just left over from other Eurorack stuff. And it just makes me realize like that Pittsburgh has been around for a long time, and the whole time they've been making really, really, really cool stuff. And this is just what Pittsburgh Modular looks like in 2023. They make banging modules. So, yes, like I said, by my measure, very, very well done. I think other people will agree with me. I think we're going to see this recommended as the heart of a Eurorack system a lot. I can't even remember what the street price is for this. So if it's out, I'll put it on the screen. If I still don't know, I'll just tell you to check my affiliate link for the price. But I think a lot of people are going to recommend this as the start of a Eurorack system. I agree with that if you plan on going big. Because I think a lot of people would be fine to start with an East Beast or West Pest or anything else. But there you go. I rambled because I always do. My name's Jorb. I love gear. I love the Taiga. I'm very, very happy to have it. It's probably going to make its way to a lot of other things I do pretty soon. Appreciate you watching. Cheers and so long.